Hi, welcome to Herbast's Kitchen. In today's video I'm going to show you how to make a vegan pizza. Now there's no excuses for ordering a takeaway pizza because you can make this recipe in 30 minutes. I'm going to start with the ingredients for the base. That's 200 grams of plain flour, about 100 to 140 mils of just tap water, 7 grams of easy bake yeast, a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of oil. You can use olive oil, vegetable oil or sunflower oil. And then optionally, I like to add a teaspoon each of garlic granules and oregano. You can leave those out if you don't have them or if you don't like them. I just like to add them because they add a nice bit of depth to the flavour of the base. Now obviously the beauty of making a pizza yourself is that you can dictate what you put on the pizza. So these are really just more suggestions than anything else, but this is what I like to put on my pizza, so I'm going to share that with you. So I like to start with passata, so that's tomato passata. I'm going to use about 300 grams of that. Obviously just use however much it takes to cover your pizza base. And then for the actual toppings, I go with half an onion, and that'll be just roughly chopped. And then half a red pepper, roughly chopped. There's about 100 grams of mushrooms, chopped again. And then just some frozen sweet corn straight from the freezer, about 100 grams of that as well. Then there'll be some vegan cheese. Now I do sometimes make a cheese sauce. Look out for the video for that because I'm going to make one which will show how to make that soon. But just today, just going for some supermarket bought vegan grated cheese. I'm going to use some sun-dried tomatoes as well. They're a good addition on a pizza. They work really well. And then about 10 to 15 of the olives, and they'll just be halved. So I'm just going to leave all those ingredients to the side to start with, because the first thing we need to do is prepare the dough. So obviously we're going to need a large mixing bowl and scales. So starting with the flour, it's 220 grams. And I'm going to keep that out because we'll need some to dust the surface when we start rolling the base out. So as with a bread dough, it's easier to try and sort of make a well in the middle of this so that when you pour in the water it spreads more evenly. So with the flour in there, I'm going to start adding the rest of the dry ingredients. So that's the teaspoon of salt, and the 7 grams of yeast. Now 7 grams, you'll probably notice, is the same as a sachet. Obviously I've got it in a tin, but so it's just 1 sachet if you're using a sachet. And then just a teaspoon, so just a teaspoon each of oregano and garlic granules. And as I said, these are optional, but I do recommend adding them because it just adds a little bit of flavour to the base. Okay, so before adding the oil, I'm going to start with the water. Now, I said 100 to 140 mils because it depends what brand of flour you're using. So different brands of flour will absorb different amounts of water. So what I like to do is put the scale to 0 and then just start adding it up to about 100, and then just see how it goes with the sort of consistency of the dough. So then just sort of bring that all together. You can use your hands or you can use a wooden spoon if you're trying to keep your hands dry. So you can see that the dough isn't hasn't fully come together there, so I'm probably going to need to add another, probably up to 40 mils, but I always find it better just to add it in 20s. So I'm going to put another 20 in. Let's see if that comes together anymore, but I suspect I will need that another 20. But there's still just one or two sort of crumbs of flour left in there, so just to bring that final bit together, I'll just take that up again. And once it's all come together, you can start to sort of mopping up the rest of the flour and the other dry ingredients. So you're looking for the dough to sort of not be too wet and sticky. It just needs to be sort of a little bit soft. And just sort of make sure there are no sort of crumbs of flour left over in the bowl. So I've brought that together, and you can see that that's sort of, you can sort of mould it around a little bit. It's a tiny little bit sticky, but that's good to go. So I'm just going to add the oil into that now, and just before it comes together too much. So it's just 2 teaspoons. And obviously the oil will add a little bit of flavour as well. And just keep sort of mixing that in. So the idea now is just to knead that for only a sort of 2 or 3 minutes. So you're really just bringing it together. Add more flour if required. And you definitely see that sort of come together now. The oil's given it a nice sort of soft, flexible texture, and you can sort of mould that into a ball. So if you're looking for sort of advice on how to knead dough, if you haven't tried it before, I do have a video on bread making, which goes into more detail about the kneading process. But in essence, all you're doing is just sort of pushing the dough into the table, stretch it away from you, and then fold it over on itself. And then you're sort of trying to stretch the sort of outer skin of it, and gradually you're basically training it to be flexible and stretchy. So that's been a couple of minutes now, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to get the rest of the dough off my hands. So we can then just drop that into the mixing bowl and leave it. You don't have to cover it because we're only going to leave it for a few minutes. So the idea is now that we leave that just to rest while we prepare the rest of the ingredients. So while the dough rests, we're going to preheat the oven as well. It's going to be 220 centigrade, or that's about 200 fan assisted. So as I said, we'll save the flour because we will need that for when we roll out the dough. So starting with a knife, so we've got the mushrooms here, so it's just going to slice those quite fine. The idea, the reason I'm using sort of half onions and half peppers is because if you overload a pizza, as tempting as it is, then you'll probably cause the base to go quite soggy in the oven, because all the sort of extra moisture from the ingredients will just drain into the base and it sort of won't rise correctly. So it's obviously good to sort of top it more heavily than your typical takeaway pizza, but at the same time you do need to be careful not to overload it. So the onion, literally just roughly chop it. You can do it in strips if you wish. I'm just going to put it in squares, and the same with the red pepper. Very quickly just chop it. that's that ready. And so for the olives, obviously you need to drain those a little bit. Just sort of 10 to 15 of those would be enough, because we're going to half them anyway. Okay, that's the olives ready. So the sun-dried tomatoes, obviously these aren't sort of essential for the pizza, but they do make a really good difference. Add a real sort of burst of flavour. And again, you can just sort of use really however many you want of them. Normally sort of 5 or 6 are enough. Depends how many you've got. Again, that's the beauty of making pizza yourself. You can, there's no sort of set boundaries as to what you can put on it. And obviously you can just chop these up however you like and spread them around the pizza when you're topping it. Okay, so that's it. We're ready to start rolling out the pizza base. Right, so that's all the ingredients ready. I'm just gonna shift those out of the way for a sec, because what we need to do now is start rolling out the dough. So I'm just going to put a light dusting of flour on the surface. Bring the dough back. So it won't have risen much in that time, but it's just sort of, it's nice and relaxed, and you'll find it a little bit softer, silky, and sort of ready to start rolling out. So just give it a quick knead for sort of 20 seconds or so, and that'll just bring it back together and reduce any sort of any of the oil that's sort of built up around underneath it or anything. So you can get it into a ball. Now obviously the pizzas you're used to ordering from the takeaways or in restaurants are usually round. I actually quite like rolling them out in rectangles in a sort of oblong shape. It does work better, because what I'm going to do, I've got a big rectangular tray. So obviously if you've got a pizza tray, that's fine. I've got a rectangular one, so I'm just going to roll it out to match that. You'll find if you're rolling it into a circle, you will probably get it out to about 30 centimeters or a foot. So you'll see I'm just sort of patting it out at the moment. I am going to get the rolling pin on. I'm just trying to sort of start it off in the general shape that I want it. I find that beneficial if you're trying to sort of get it looking nice and in a sort of definite shape. Right, so I'm getting a rolling pin now. So with the flour, it's important just to keep sort of moving it around so it doesn't stick to the surface. I'm just going to roll it backwards and forwards a couple of times and then rotate it 90 degrees and do the same again. Obviously, as I said, I'm going sort of more rectangular, more of an elongated circle, so I'll be rolling it more in that direction. And ultimately you're looking for sort of about 5 millimeters thickness in the middle, and try and make it a little bit thicker on the edges, maybe up to a centimetre or 10 millimeters. But it shouldn't take long to roll out. As I said, just keep making sure you've got plenty of flour on there, and sort of the final stages you can just sort of press it out with your fingers again and try and sort of retain that thicker crust. You find when you pick it up it will stretch a little bit as well, so that's sort of, I think that's how the sort of traditional Italian chefs do it. They'll pick it up and let the weight of the dough just stretch it out gradually. I'm not skilled enough to do that yet, so I just like to roll it out nice and simple, and I don't waste any dough on the floor. Right, so that's ready to go on. So before I put it on the tray, I'm just going to use some coconut oil just to grease that. Obviously you can use baking paper if you wish. It's really just so that the pizza doesn't stick to it. Makes it easier to slice it and serve it up afterwards. Okay, so as I said, that dough is ready. Right, so I'm just going to bring the tray as close as I can get it, and then drop the pizza base straight onto it, roughly sort of lay it where I need it. Okay, so that's ready to start now adding the topping. I'm going to start with the passata then. So as I said, that was about 300 grams, but you really do need to just sort of drop it onto your base and just spread it around, see how much that uses. I find it's usually around 300. Just use the back of a spoon just to spread it and leave a little bit of a sort of margin around the edge. And again, another advantage of making this yourself is you can control how much of the passata you actually add to it. Obviously if you overload it, again it will weigh down the base and probably ruin it in the oven. So it's about just having everything in moderation on a pizza. Right, so that's the passata finished with. So then it's just a case of adding the rest of it. I always start with onions. Okay, and then some red peppers. Again, just sort of spread it well around the base, going into all the corners or right to the edges if you're making a circle. So then the mushrooms, some nice big mushrooms there. Obviously the mushrooms will get smaller in the oven as well as they cook. And then some olives. Perhaps I should get a job at Subway. Sun-dried tomatoes. Just drop some sweetcorn on there as well. And finally, I think that's everything. Just some cheese. So as I said, there is a pretty useful cheese sauce recipe which I've been using for a while, and I'm going to share that with you at some point in the near future. I'm going to be doing a video of how to create that. But in the meantime, I'm just using this supermarket vegan grated cheese. It's a sort of cheddar style cheese, and it does the trick, especially if you're in a hurry. You just need to get it all on there and get it in the oven. I can't remember if I mentioned, but it's about 100 grams of the cheese. That's usually what I would go with. So this is about as heavy as I would load the pizza. As I said, any more than that, then you'll start to make the base really kind of sort of soggy and moist in the middle, and it won't bake, and it'll probably stick to the tray as well. So yeah, that's about as much as I would go with. I'm now going to put that in the oven, and that's going to go in the oven for 10 to 15 minutes. I'll start checking it after 10 minutes. You can stick your little finger in the middle, and if it starts to burn your finger, then it's ready. So I've taken it out of the oven. That's been about 12 minutes, and you can see, so the pizza firstly hasn't stuck to the tray, so that's a good start. The edges have started to sort of brown quite nicely, some darker parts with the tomato, but that's good. The cheese is melted, so that is ready to serve. So I've transferred that off the baking tray, and that's ready to slice up and serve as you please. So that's the end of today's video. Thank you very much for watching. If you have a go at this recipe, please leave any feedback in the comment section down below. Also like and subscribe. I'll see you in another video.